My first ever stand-up gig, not one single laugh. I was too new, not good enough. And so to console myself, I got drunk after the show. And I'm staggering home at night. And in the distance, I saw a little old lady. And folks, as she saw me, she clutched her handbag like that. So something inside me died.
Yeah.
So I went over to that little old lady and I took that handbag. See, that's the joke, you see. That's a joke.
Joining us on the podcast today is somebody that I am very happy to now call a friend. He is a very, very funny comedian that has come all the way across the pond from the UK. Stephen K Amos. He's a writer, he's a performer, he's a reality TV contestant now, which I bet you never thought you'd add that to your repertoire. But Stephen, welcome to Life Uncut.
I am so thrilled to be here, Britt. And can I say I consider you a friend now as well? I think I know more about you than your listeners do. We spent a good 4 weeks together living our best lives in the South African jungle. And Laura, very nice to meet you too. I had
so
lots
nice.
about you.
I think I know more about you than anyone because watching it all back on TV. But I'd love to know, knowing that now you think you know Britt better than the listeners.
Yeah.
What's my favourite sex position?
What did you learn about her? Or what was the most surprising thing about her that maybe people wouldn't know?
Well, bearing in mind that I came into this program not knowing anybody.
Yeah.
So I had no idea of anybody's background and anybody's what they'd done in the past.
You were like, these people are not celebrities.
So
You're like, who are this lot?
Well, I had to take on board. That's the title of the program. We must all be celebrities. So I looked at Britt and I thought, this is a woman who is prepared to muck in and get down and dirty. It did not occur to me once that how glamorous this woman is. Do you know what I mean? Because, do you know what I mean?
Because you look like shit 90%
No,
of the time.
I thought you looked like...
Loud and clear, Stephen.
No, but you know what I mean? But we all looked really kind of rough and were slumming it. And for some people, particularly if you're in the public eye and you have a certain image, to go against that is quite a big step for a lot of us.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the jungle were talking about how it looked like Callum was wearing makeup. It looked like Sky was wearing makeup. Do you know what I mean? And it looked like even Khan was wearing makeup. But there's a certain group of us who were just like,
Who
keeping
definitely
it real.
were not wearing makeup. That was me. I like to think of myself as like, I'm like the ultimate catfish. Like me with makeup and hair is completely different person to the second I wake up. But I'm okay with that.
Completely untrue.
Mucking in is what I mean. In fact, you look, as a woman with no makeup, you are stunning.
Thank you. But this was not supposed to turn into this. Okay,
Yeah,
let's get back to you.
I'm more about me. You're stunning. But with the makeup and all that, when I first saw you outside of the jungle, that's the first thing I said. I went, wow. And your response to me is, yeah, I scrub up really good, don't I? And it was like a lovely piece of self-deprecation. And it's just great. And just the fact that we all mucked in together.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize the laugh. I mean, this came through in the jungle, this very distinct laugh, which is very similar to your mum's, where you get it from. I also learned really a lot about the closeness of your family, which was really nice to see, because one of the things I wanted to get from this experience was to talk to people who you'd never normally meet, but have really good, interesting conversations and hear about the closeness of your family. And you mentioned about how your parents had struggled to look after all four of you and that you're all quite close in age, and the struggles your parents went through, they didn't ever express that to you. But it's only as an adult you saw that and you could recognize what the sacrifices they made. And that was great to hear. Do you know what I mean?
I'm actually chuffed that you remembered that, because I think a big part of our connection in the jungle, speaking for myself, but there are so many different characters in the jungle, but I had a pull to Stephen because we could have some very deep conversations, and some conversations that probably never made it to air because they were just genuine conversations.
Yeah.
We were never having conversations just for TV. I mean, sometimes you do. You're like, oh, they'd probably love that to air that. But there are different people in the jungle give you different things and provide different things, and there's not a lot to do in there. Like, you have a lot of time on your hands. You can't read. You're not getting up to date with the news. You don't know what's happening in world politics. And then so I think that Stephen and I sort of got that from each other, some more, I don't know, would you say conversations of substance? I don't want to...
Yes. I mean, not to be disparaging about any of our campmates, but for example, because we don't know what is going to be aired and how we're going to be portrayed.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I learned big time, because whenever I do my own shows or radio shows or whatever, I'm involved in the edit. So I know what's going out. So when you've got no idea what's going out, you've got no control. And that's one thing I've learned about myself. Relinquishing control ain't my thing.
No, it's not.
Not my thing, baby. I want to have a bit of a say in this. Like, for example, I remember having a chat with Callum about us being in South Africa. I think you might have been there, and how important it was for me as a black man to go to that country where 30 years ago, I would not have been allowed to.
Yeah.
And we discussed apartheid, and Callum, 26, had no idea about the history of South Africa as a country. And I thought to myself, wow, this might be a really good conversation to air, because it will still educate people about a point in history that should never, ever be repeated. And I've not watched the series back myself yet, but I've heard from my friends that wasn't aired at all.
It wasn't aired.
Which
but
is
also,
a shame.
I mean, we can get into the nuance and unpack that, but it must be frustrating to be like, how are you 26 years old and you've never heard of this? Like, how am I educating you on this?
But again, I didn't have a go at Callum for not knowing that.
No.
I found it a way of educating somebody who's he's 26. And it just told me that there may be a lot of people of that age bracket who simply don't know.
And just to like double down on that, there is not, like, we all learned something from everyone. The amount of things that Stephen and I learned from Callum about what his field is, health and nutrition and fitness, and there's so much that he can educate on, which is why it's so beautiful, because everyone in that jungle took something from everyone. So I don't want to make it sound like Stephen and I had conversations that we didn't have with anyone else. That's not it. But it was definitely something that we connected on.
Yes, yeah. And I did have conversations with Callum about things. You're right, Brittany. He did the whole health thing, the body and whatever. He told me things about my body that I hadn't even got a clue about. I mean, look at me. I'm a man of a certain age. I'd like to say 30, but that would be a dirty lie. But he taught me things. Every single one, as you said, every single one of us had a story to tell.
I would love to know, because when you say you're someone who struggles with relinquishing control, and when you are a comedian, so like a lot of people expect you to be funny, but then probably don't realize that just because you're a comedian doesn't mean that you're funny 24/7. Like you also, it's a performance as much as it is part of your character. Do you watch back reality TV and question like how funny you were, or whether you were supposed to play more of a character in that instance?
What a great question, Laura. Absolutely. When I was in the midst of it and I was wondering, okay, maybe they put me here because I'm a comedian and I'm supposed to be this role. But as soon as I got in, there were massive personalities in there, some people who were larger than life. And I just thought to myself, I cannot compete with this. I came here because I wanted to show a different side of me. And that side of me is the person off stage. On stage is an extension of who I am. And it's all about performance. I'm in control. But in a setting with 11 other people, my whole thing was to take bits in, you know, kind of figure where I am in the pecking order of the group, find my space, find my tribe, if you will.
Yeah.
But not to be that annoying person doing jokes 24/7, because that would be so tedious.
Yeah.
Do you find that in your real life, in your friendship groups, that you go to a dinner or a group event and you feel the pressure to like, oh, I've got to be the one that entertains tonight?
I don't actually, but the thing is, in my friendship group, people know me. And I've got the same friends I've had for 30 odd years, and we've all got our sort of roles. Good friends of mine, Katie and Tim, who live in the UK, but they've moved to Australia about 15 years ago. Katie's really organised, and we all leave things to her. Tim is very, very sensible and very calm. I'm the jokey one. So within that friendship group, we all laugh. Everyone's funny as well. So even though that's my job on the outside, there's a fly in the studio.
I think it was a moth.
It was on your laptop when we recorded the last episode. It's just been flying around this whole time.
Oh my goodness. It's like being back in the jungle again.
I wanted to give you an immersive experience today, Stephen.
So yeah, so I don't think, I don't feel the pressure too, but if I'm out with people I don't know, for example, if I finish a gig and I'm walking through the streets and there's people who came to the gig, they expect you to be funny.
And you're like, why didn't you chicken cross the road?
Yeah. Or people come up to me in the street and go, oh, tell us a joke now. And like, I'm not working right now. Yeah. And their normal response is, well, you're not funny then. Because they expect you to be like what they see 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I did a show last weekend at the Gold Coast, and Sky from the Jungle and Denise came.
Yeah.
And Sky's partner came as well. And after the show, their mouths were open. They were like, you're really funny. Because that's not what I did in the jungle. I wasn't 24/7. Do you know what I mean?
Because you were just you.
Yeah, I was just me. And they were genuinely shocked that I was really funny. And I was like, you know what, guys? That's what I do. That's my day job.
I love that. And I can't wait, because I'm going to go see you this weekend. So I can't wait to see it. I mean, my mission in the jungle, I didn't really tell Stephen that, but I was like, I'm going to make this guy laugh at some point. But I was like dropping jokes left, right and center. And
you're like trying to get a laugh so you could be like, I made the comedian laugh.
No, I did. And there was one joke, and I think it was the masturbation joke, which is funny in itself. I told a masturbation joke and he actually laughed. And I was like, yes, get that on record. Get it. I made the comedian laugh.
I did. I howled. I howled with laughter.
What was the joke?
It's too long. I'll tell you.
It's when you have to explain a joke, it's no longer funny. Well, speaking of being the funny one, we do something on every podcast episode.
Okay.
We ask every one of our guests the same question, and it's called an accidentally unfiltered story. So it's basically just your most embarrassing story.
My most embarrassing
It's very
story.
humbling.
Yes, very cathartic. I've got two for you, actually.
Do them both.
Yeah.
We got time.
Okay, great. The first one is when I was about 22 and I had a job with a magazine and I was the advertising sales rep. So I had to sell advertising over the phone.
What a different
It
life.
sounds as dull as it is. Cold calling companies going, do you want to buy advertising? No, what do you... Anyway, you know when you're really fed up in a job, you start going late, you don't really care about it anymore. There was one day, and my parents are from Nigeria, okay, that's quite important, and I'm from London. There was one day I thought, you know what? I don't want to go to work today. I'm going to ring in and pretend I'm sick. But I'm going to ring in
We've all been there.
on behalf of my dad. So I rang my own boss and put on a Nigerian accent. And I said, hello, is Brian there, please? We'll put you through. Hello, Brian. It is Stephen's father here. Yes. I'm afraid Stephen is not very well. Okay. He will be in tomorrow. Okay. And he put the phone down. And I was like, boom, ha, 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 got away with that. Da-da-da. Had a great day off in my house, dancing in my underpants. And the next day I went to work and the guy goes, Steve, can I have a word? And I said, yeah. I went into his office. He went, do you think I'm stupid? And I said, what? He went, you called me yesterday with an accent.
What do you know that didn't?
Pretending to be your dad.
How did he know?
Because I did a really bad, shitty accent.
No, I was convinced. Maybe you've gotten better at accents since then. But
Maybe I've got better. But the thing is, remember, I worked in telesales. So he hears my voice all the time.
Day.
All day, every day, right? And I was trying to do an accent where I wasn't overdoing it like that to make it sound exaggerated. So I was kind of midway between English and Nigerian, but I sounded like me. And I honestly, at the time, thought I got away with it.
And did you get fired?
I got bloody fired.
Mind you, this is a step up. At least you were selling things on the phone. Stephen started door knocking, selling Tupperware.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Can you imagine?
Tupperware.
Yeah, door
What a
to door.
life.
As a 17-year-old, right? We were all put in a van at the bottom of a street and told to work each side of the street. And the one thing back in the day that people had in their houses was Tupperware.
To be fair, though, people would have bought it from someone coming. It's very convenient. You always need more Tupperware.
Not from this boy. Knock on the door and they open it. What? Tupperware? Shut the door in my face.
That's so bad.
He only got one sale.
Yeah.
How long did that job last?
That job lasted a day and a half.
I guess
A day and a half.
I guess you weren't being paid on commission then.
It
No, it was
commission.
commission.
That's what it was. It was commission. Can you imagine?
It was paid no money.
It felt like we're being kidnapped, a bit like the jungle, right? Where I didn't know any of my colleagues, but we all met on a street corner, right? Like boys of the night, and were huddled into a van, given our wares, driven down to a street and going, right, go. What?
I did this when I was a kid. I must have been 13, 14. It was my first job and it was delivering the phone books.
Yeah.
You know, the Yellow Pages phone books we used to have in
Wow.
Australia. But I don't know.
We have them in England as well.
I don't know what they're like in England, but they're so big.
Yes.
They are fucking huge. And I was this little 13-year-old trying to lug phone books down a street. And I think I got paid $7 an hour.
Wow.
That's good.
bad.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
I know. Look at me now.
Stephen was commission. Okay, and the second story, because I know we love a poo story and you shoot yourself.
You love a poo story. Okay, do you know what? Okay, I'm going to tell you one that you may not use before I do that other poo story. Do you know back in the day when you meet someone online? Yeah.
I met my partner on
Dating.
online.
I know. I said back in the day because I'm trying to be nice, Britt,
Okay.
because this was years ago for me, and I was chatting to this chap, and as we were chatting, he said, "What are you into?" And I was like, "Oh, just the regular stuff." And then I said, "What are you into?" And he says, "I like dirty folk." And I said, "What do you mean dirty folk?" He says, "I like it when someone hasn't really washed." And I went, "Okay, how do you mean?" Then he went, "Like if you go to the lavatory and you don't wipe your ass." And I was like, that sounds interesting. Okay.
Like, sure. Not to
So,
yuck someone's yum, but
yeah,
let's try
exactly.
it.
Each to his own. So we arranged to meet that afternoon, and I don't know why, but I decided to have a Thai curry. And I went to the bathroom.
You lent in to
and
his desires.
I absolutely went for it. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be awkward. I'm not going to wipe, though. I'm not going to wipe. Didn't wipe. Your man comes over, and he's lying on the bed, and I instantly just sit on his face. And this is all I heard. Oh, my God. And got up and ran to the bathroom and threw up. And I was like...
He threw up?
Yes.
But surely when he said, I like it a bit dirty, he didn't mean take a dump on his face.
Well, I didn't know what he meant. He said...
He's like, that's too dirty, man.
That's too dirty.
Like, you went too far.
I went, you didn't give me a pie chart.
The
I didn't
barometer
know.
of dirty.
Exactly. All I did was just sat. I mean, there was a squelch noise as I sat, but I thought that was what was required. Suffice to say, I never saw him again.
He was like, I like dirty. You're far.
Yeah, you're filthy. What a pig.
That's better than your shitting in the car story. That is one of my favorite accent unfilters we've ever had.
Oh, really? And that's, I mean, please don't judge me. I know that's never happened since, I should point out. No, if everyone, you should have just said musty or something, or moist, something else. But don't say, his phrase was, when you go to the bathroom and you don't wipe.
Yeah, but didn't he mean for sex, like the penis, not the lips? He didn't want it on his face, did he?
When you go to the toilet and don't wipe, is what he said.
No, but didn't he mean that for sexual purposes? I don't think he wanted you to sit on his face.
Didn't even occur to me. But I sat. Oh, my goodness. And, it's like, I don't even ever met somebody. And years ago, this is funny, actually. Years ago on the old dating app thing, I met someone and the person came to my house and clearly was not the person in the photograph.
Just a totally different.
Yeah, and I could not hide my horror. I was just like, And he went, it's not happening, is it? I went, no. That's the equivalent to sitting on somebody's face.
Yeah.
I don't think you can compare those two.
I think they're pretty different. It'd be like that person that was a different person sitting on your face. That would be the equivalent.
It's rejection, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought that's what you wanted. I didn't think outside the box.
I'm actually shocked, but one thing I'm impressed at is your commitment. Like 24 hours before, you thought about what meal you have that's going to make the most damage in the toilet to sit on his face.
Do you know what? If there's one thing about me is I will commit to a story. Yeah, I will commit. If you want something, ask Stevie Boy. I mean, I'll
make it happen.
I'll make it happen for you.
You got a fantasy, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've never said that in public, but now it's out there.
Do you know what? He's never asked someone to do that again. He has never texted someone and said, I like a dirty. He's like, he doesn't ask.
I like a clean boy. He's like,
wipe. I've taught him a lesson, a life
please
lesson.
Wipe.
Yeah.
Not all heroes wear capes, Stephen. Let's talk about who you are before comedy. Like, what was your life like growing up?
I come from a family of 6 siblings. Parents arrived in London in the mid-'60s, and London mid-'60s, very, very different place. In the same way that, we talked earlier about you and your family, your parents having sacrifices. My parents never, ever told us the things they must have gone through in the early 60s when they arrived in London. They really shielded us from that. But as a result of that, they shielded us from everything. So we didn't get to go on school journeys. We didn't have sleepovers with friends. We weren't allowed to play outside on the street. Nothing.
Are you saying that in terms of racism that they would have faced? Like they were protecting you from going on a school camp because they didn't know how you'd be treated? Or was it just like they just wanted to wrap you in cotton wool?
100%. Because bear in mind, parents from Nigeria. And when they were growing up, Nigeria was under British rule. So they were kind of invited to the motherland, in inverted commas, to come and help out and do whatever. But when they got there, the reality was completely different. Before they could find a place to live, they were met with signs. It was very popular in the UK. Signs on doors that said, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs.
So England was like the catfish. England was like, yeah, come, we'll welcome you. But then you got there and
the reality was like, don't think so. And to get different... Like my dad, for example, he's not a drinking man. He was pulled over by the police on a fake charge of drink driving. And the reason why he got off when it went to court was that they spelt his name incorrectly. Because no matter how drunk you are, you don't spell your name incorrectly. You know how to spell your name. That's one of the basics. And the judge was like, threw it out.
So he went and had to stand in court. And the judge looked at him and was like, I don't think this is real.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so many stories. And even when I was growing up, being followed by the police, there's one, I lived in southwest London, and I had an orange Beetle, Volkswagen Beetle, and I was in the West End with my friends driving back home, about a 45-minute drive, and I was stopped on that journey 4 times by 4 different police cars. And you kind of think, what?
This is the side of it that we, and it's like, it's such a privilege of the way in which we get to grow up, is that like we never will see or experience that type of racism, that type of profiling. What impact does that have on you when like your whole life you grow up being like, got to be on high alert, knowing that it'll be assumed that I'm doing something wrong when I'm not, or I'm trying to sell Tupperware and I'll have the door shut in my face.
Yeah, I mean, it is a weird thing when you are playing second fiddle or you're on the back foot all the time. And that's why I think the phrase, people got a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear people say you've got a chip on your shoulder, my response is, I can't see it. And if you can see it, who put it there?
Mm-hmm.
You've made me be aware and conscious. I've got friends, for example, Asian backgrounds, Indian backgrounds, Nigerian backgrounds with very distinct names. And that alone was a source of comedy and humor and ridicule, in the classroom when people are reading out the register, the teacher's going, and everyone's sniggering. If you have that from when you're like 5 until you're 15, that does something to you.
I think Michael Hing, the Australian comedian. Do you know Michael?
Yes.
Yeah. So he was at our live show. We've interviewed him. He's wonderful. We talked a lot about like microaggressions and micro-racism. And it's one of these things where ignorance is bliss. It's easy for us to sit back and say, oh, yes, we don't stand by racism. We know what racism is. But when you speak to someone like, conversations that we had in the jungle where you told me once that you got punched in the face. You were standing up for some girls. You got punched in the face and there was a lot of like racism, sniggering there. But there's a lot of these day-to-day things that we don't think about. So the sniggering at someone's pronunciation of a name is something that we don't even consider. And I think that that's why these conversations are so important, because that is a cumulative effect. Maybe one time won't last with you, but when your entire life is
Absolutely. And even something as simple as you going to school and you smelling a bit like your parents' home cooking is enough to make people laugh at you, to make you stand out. One of my earliest jokes when I started doing stand-up was this. I remember going to school, my first day at primary school. I ran into the classroom and I ran straight back home and I said, Mum, apparently there's a black boy in my class. I can't find him anywhere. What that joke means is that in my household, there were no differences. Yeah. No one talked about race. As soon as I stepped out of that door and into the classroom, that's when it became an issue. You know what I mean?
Did dealing with that throughout your life, especially your childhood, make it challenging for you to be proud of your heritage?
Oh, God, I remember back in the day, if my mum, for example, would go shopping, I would pray that she wouldn't wear her national dress because we didn't want to stand out. Now I embrace it. Of course I do. I'd pray that she didn't bump into somebody that she knew from Nigeria and they'd speak in their language because people would stop and stare. Do you know what I mean? All those little things that you just don't. I just want to fit in. I don't want to be the odd one out.
Especially as a kid, because that's all every kid wants, is to just be accepted by their peers.
Exactly. Slot in and don't. And, I've had people ask me, when people ask you questions and whether that's what I loved about the jungle, that we all came in there with a level of respect for each other. So therefore we could ask questions that you knew came from a good place.
Yeah.
But when you in the outside world and people ask you questions, well, you've got to question what they really mean.
What's their motive?
Do you really how do you people wash your hair? How do you people wash your hair?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
How do you people? What do you mean? Ask me how, if you're interested, but don't make it like I don't answer for the group.
Totally. But that's also something that I think, and we've discussed this before on the podcast, as a privilege of being white, is that when we walk into a room, we're not speaking on behalf of all white people, but somehow people who come from any minority within a community, they become representative of everyone who's that minority. So you speak on behalf of everybody. This was one big thing that was brought out when we did an episode around like change the date. And so Indigenous Australians, and the person that we interviewed was like, when I'm doing this interview, I'm now the voice of every single, and she's like, it's such a responsibility.
Yeah.
And you know what? Naively, I didn't think of that. But when I started doing stand-up and when I started doing stand-up on TV in the UK, I would have young black kids, young Asian kids come up to me in the street and go, thank you for representing me. Yeah. It dawned on me that, oh my God, because there aren't many of us, it's something that I have to have on my shoulders. And if I did a shit job, wow, can you imagine? And then you hear people say, oh, black people aren't funny, or all black people they talk about race in their comedy.
Yeah.
When there's a lot more, and we're not all the same. I remember starting stand-up and being the only black person on a bill of comics.
Yeah.
Back in the day where on a bill of comics, there'd be no women.
Well, I remember you making a joke in the jungle, and it was a joke that was laced with truth, obviously, because that's where a lot of jokes come from, isn't it?
Yeah.
You were saying that when you were trying to get into comedy, you had to wait for the only black comedian to die because there was one black comedian. You're like, oh, I wish he would just die so I could, the joke, so I could take that one spot.
It's also, I think, how a lot of women comics feel as well. It's like, oh, well, they've got their token female comic, in this run and lineup as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to making jokes on stage, and that saying of when people say, oh, the only thing you talk about is race. Where's the line for you in making jokes about race? Like, where do you feel that you are comfortable with it?
I personally believe that any decent comic can tackle any subject. There is a myth that you can't say what you want anymore. You can't do jokes anymore. That's a myth. That's something that people say when they want to harp onto a bygone age where anything was permissible. The thing is, as we know, the people who were the butt of the jokes back in the day also have a platform.
Yeah.
The people who used to joke about, women or ethnic minorities or the LGBT community or whatever. Those people now are superstars and doing jokes themselves. And language and attitudes change over time. You can't harp onto a bygone era. And I think any good comedian, a white comedian can do jokes about race, a heterosexual comedian can do jokes about LGBT, as long as it's tackled in a really funny, clever way.
So you don't mind a white comedian doing a race joke? I guess it's about the context and the delivery and what's the punchline?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not a fan of punching down, personally. I know other comics do that. I'm not a fan of shock comedy either. Other comics do that. There's something for everyone, Find your own tribe, as it were. But for me, there is no line. I might self-deprecate myself to make a point, or sometimes people misinterpret the joke, and I've got to kind of explain it.
And then it loses its funniness.
Talk about the masturbating joke from the jungle for me.
For me, the playing field is leveling up.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can do jokes about anything. When I first started, I used to just do jazz hands, aren't I funny? But then the more, just do jokes, not make any points. But then I thought, you know what? I've got something to say. I know funny now, but let me try and say stuff that means something to me. Because I've heard some outrageous things during my times of doing comedy, or people come up to me and say the most outrageous things and think I'm just going to go, ho, 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 ho. No.
What changed? What made you go from wanting to just say funny jokes and make people laugh to also saying funny jokes but having a statement around how you feel or think about issues?
A couple of things. Firstly was that thing about knowing that you're representing people. Yeah. And also it's that thing about the press, the media, they like to label people. I've yet to see any of my white colleague comedy chums be described in any newspaper as white comedian, da-da-da-da. But for me, you will always see black comedian. Like,
do you still get that now?
Oh, God,
Stephen?
yes. Oh, God, yeah.
Still, it will be black comedian.
Yeah. But now it's black gay comedian. That's the thing now.
Yeah, you really handed that to him on a platter, didn't you? Now it's black gay comedian that shits on people's faces is performing on the weekend.
And the weird thing about that is that when the masses see that, that's enough to put people off going to see you because they assume they know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas just say comedian. Don't have to give me any of these monikers. And some press used to go, oh, he doesn't talk about being black enough. Oh, he doesn't talk about being gay enough. And I talk about things that matter to me.
Yeah.
And once you're in a position where you've got a captive audience, for me personally, it's not for everybody, I think you owe it to yourself and your community to say something, represent.
There's a part of me that, I get so angry, and there's a part of me that hates that we even have this conversation now. The fact that we even have to highlight the racism that you experience still, because we shouldn't be having to have these conversations, but we do. But the fact that now in 2024 you are still being headlined as black comedian enrages me and upsets me on your behalf, and then it comes back full circle. That's why we're having these conversations still. So it's a bit of we're almost chasing, I say you're almost chasing your tail on having to have the responsibility to talk about it, to educate people, to make the change. But you're still living it every single day.
You do. You live it every single day. And I try. The reason why I'm doing it is because I want to see. I see history repeating itself and things not really getting much better. I just want to be honest and true to myself. And I look at my nephews and nieces who are coming up, and I don't want them to experience what I experienced.
Do you think that the needle is shifting at all? I mean, when you say you see history repeating itself, there's been so much conversation in the last couple of years, especially around the Black Lives Movement. Do you think that it's shifting?
I think it is shifting, but I think it also is in the interest of certain political parties and whatever to keep those divisions flaring up, because that's how they keep control. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but that's how they keep control of everybody.
Totally.
Keep them fighting amongst each other. Oh, look, the black folks are getting all this. Oh, what about us? Sprinkle all that little nonsense into it and watch them fight and argue. Whereas we all know, it just sounds so trite, but if we all are united together, like when I see young kids in London coming out of school, London is generally a melting pot, and multiculturalism, people are now saying doesn't really work. You go to an inner city school in London, you'll see kids of all colours who all sound the same.
Yeah.
Because they're all mates. They've grown up together, right? Back in my day, there were pockets of groups of kids sticking together. And who knows what their parents have told them.
Well, it's even like, you've just made me think of this right now. So my brother-in-law is Indian, but raised in Scotland. So he's Scottish. But even when he moved to Australia, but everyone always says to him, oh, I didn't expect you to sound like that. To somebody, it's a throwaway comment. But to him, he's like, well, I'm Scottish, so why not?
Yeah.
And I guess it comes back to this a level of ignorance, maybe, like, oh, but you look Indian and you sound Scottish. So I just it's funny. It's funny hearing you talk.
But you know what? The thing is that, as I said earlier, there's a way you can approach someone and ask somebody a question as opposed to making it funny. And as you say, you've mentioned your brother-in-law before, and I do Scotland quite a bit, so I know what you're talking about. But if he hears that 24/7,
Totally,
that's irritating. You have to justify yourself. Like sometimes I remember getting a taxi from the airport in London. I arrived, I rang for a taxi, the taxi turned up, and he looked at me and I didn't expect you to be I said, what? Oh. And he backtracked.
You finish that sentence, I dare you.
Keep it in your brain. Keep it in your, why do you have to vocalize it? Just go, you might learn something.
Yeah.
But, not everyone is the same.
Yeah.
Totally. Like when I used to joke as well about going to America, and Americans have got no point of reference for a black Englishman. They don't, because apparently my face does not fit my voice. And I say to those people, this is my face, this is my voice, deal with it. And so I like to mess with them. And so I went to a coffee shop, and this is all I said. My good man, come hither. And the guy was like, oh my God. Oh, hold on. Alopecia, get over here. Anaconda, get over here. Say it again. So I just kind of and I like to play with the notion of race as well.
Yeah.
To get people kind of thinking. I used to joke as well about doing my first ever stand-up gig, doing 5 minutes, not one single laugh. I was too new, not good enough jokes. And so to console myself, I got drunk after the show. And I'm staggering home at night. And in the distance, I saw a little old lady. And folks, as she saw me, she clutched her handbag like that. So something inside me died.
Yeah.
So I went over to that little old lady and I took that handbag. See, that's the joke, you see. That's the joke. But if you notice in that joke, I didn't say the race of the little old lady.
Yeah.
Yeah? So you've already assumed.
She's a little white old lady.
Yeah. You see what I mean? And I like to play with that.
Did she have any cash in the bag?
Oh, God.
Yeah,
that's why I bought this watch.
So, Stephen, something that I think will surprise people, because you are known worldwide as a comedian, is that you weren't always a comedian. You were a lawyer.
Well, yes. That was my first foray. Again, I think that stems for two things. My parents were the kind of parents who said, in the UK, get yourself an education.
Yeah.
Once you have that degree in your hand, nobody can take it away. Whether you go on to get a job is another thing.
Whether anyone employs you.
As long as you got that. And they instilled that in us from a young age. And I really, really kind of embraced that. In fact, I do a joke about it as well. I'll just throw this in. Before I did my law degree, I did something called O-levels. And they will determine whether you go to university or whether you take them again.
Yeah.
And I did 6 of them. And to rebel against my parents, I failed all of those. I failed them all. And it was in the days where you got a piece of paper with your results on, and you'd had to take that piece of paper back to your parents, right? It wasn't on computers. And I can remember handing that paper to my mum, and she was like, oh, Lord Jesus, how can we look our friends in the eyes when we tell them our son Stephen is not just a simpleton, but he has a certificate to prove it? So I kind of play with that. So I wanted to study law because my passion was to look after the underdog, people who faced injustice.
Yeah.
Because I felt it from my family and some of my friends. And that's what drove me to kind of want to do that. But then as I was studying it, and I've got a real passion now for real life crime documentaries. Oh,
That's what we bonded over.
Oh my God, love those. Yeah, I fact check.
You guys are sick.
Yeah, we're sick.
I love it.
Sick in the head.
No, we're just very aware.
I
I would know, Laura, how to kill you and dispose of your body.
And I
would do it with him.
I can't sleep at night because all I think about is all the many ways that someone's going to sneak into my house and kill me.
How Stephen is going to sneak into your house.
And get away with it.
Okay, you guys are doing nothing for your own causes. Like, stop it, okay? The two of you.
And so then I went traveling to New York and I met a friend who was living there. And he had a sad story as well. He lived in London, had a 19th birthday party and nobody came. Oh, so he moved. Yeah, it was so sad. So he moved.
That's actually like
devastating.
your worst nightmare. Yes. You put a birthday, like invites out and no one comes.
So he moved to America. And so I went to see him.
That's a big reaction.
Well,
I get it. My birthday, I'm out.
Oh, I would.
No friends here.
Yeah, I would.
No one cares for me.
Nobody cares. But when I say, maybe this might give you more context. For his 19th birthday party, he had balloons.
He had balloons.
I don't get it.
He blew balloons.
Well, no, they're balloons.
He's just a dork. He was a dork. He blew balloons up for his own birthday party and no one came.
I do not even think of dork. I think there's nothing wrong with balloons. I just blew them up.
19-year-olds are getting lit with a punch bowl. You know, they get lit with jelly shots. They're not having balloons.
32nd birthday and I did balloons everywhere. Does that make me a dork?
Yeah, it does. But
that's quite charming.
I see why. Why is it charming?
Because it's 32. That's like ironic.
Oh, you're old now because you're a dork still.
That's ironic.
Yeah.
But when you're a teenager, you're like,
not ironic.
Come on.
Okay, so he's moved to England.
So he's moved to
America.
New York. Yeah, and then I would see him, and then staying with him at the same time was another girl. And I didn't know her. She was also from England. And then she said after this long weekend, after bottomless brunches, you're really funny. You should do comedy. And it didn't occur to me that what I wanted to do as a lawyer, I could do with comedy. And the difference is I won't take people's baggage home.
Yeah.
How do you mean you could do the same thing?
I get people sending me stuff on social media or back in the day letters telling me how a joke or routine has really saved their day, has made them forget their worries, or one young man sent me a thing about, I saw your show today and it's inspired me to tell my parents that I'm gay. You know, things like that you don't think about because I'm quite a passionate soul, believe it or not, but that's why I'm in awe of social workers, nurses, doctors, people like that who take on real heartache and tragedy and try. I couldn't do it. I'd be so invested in your story.
Broken.
And I'd be broken. I would be of no use.
Well, saying this, you know, you have but you have teenagers who message you and say, you know, you gave me the confidence to speak to my parents about being gay. What was that experience like for you? Because when you're spending so much of your adolescence trying to impress everyone, trying to fit in, trying to not stand out and to be like perceived as being like the good kid. How did they respond to this? Or were you able to have a conversation with your family about it?
Oh, my goodness. Do you know what? I had to spend time dealing with the fact that I was a black person in London. Yeah. So let's do that.
That's what I mean. You're already
I can hide the gay stuff, which is what I did.
Yeah,
I did. I that could stay on the back burner. So I didn't talk about that. I wore a ring on my wedding finger. When I think back, it was obviously some sort of decoy. People made assumptions. I never told anybody I was married, never told anybody I had a girlfriend. People made assumptions. Let me just deal with the race issue first. Let me just deal with that, and the other stuff can come along. But the older I got, and I thought, I'm comfortable with who I am. I don't ever want to be that person who looks over their shoulder, who's quite scared. I've got friends who are living what they call on the down low, leading double lives.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
But it also... living a life like that just leads to self-loathing. It leads to you feeling as though the person you are authentically is not good enough, or you won't be accepted, or you'll be that 19-year-old who has no friends. Yeah. That's what it leads to.
But, excuse my ignorance, but at the time and now, I'm not sure. I know there are a lot of African countries that accept being homosexual, and I know there's a lot of African countries that absolutely do not. What is Nigeria like, or what was it like? So were your parents going to be accepting if you told them, or did you feel like there was an extra layer of fear because of, where they've come from and what they grew up knowing?
Yeah, good question. I would not have sat down and told them.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because I didn't want to put that onto them.
Yeah.
Because I know the history of the country, and I know that it would bring, apart from the shame to me that I felt, can you imagine going through your life feeling ashamed of yourself? Yeah. I didn't want the shame for them. So having to carry something on your shoulders that is invisible to everybody else, is so devastating and it crushes you and you don't realize, you don't know who you are anymore. So it was easier for me to say nothing and just keep going and not to burden them with anything. But the moment I was able to leave my parents' house and live on my own, I owed nobody a single thing. You know, I paid my own rent. I paid my own bills. I'm not asking for anything.
Yeah.
And you can judge me all you want, but as long as you're not putting food in my mouth, say what you want.
I don't know if your parents are still alive, so please forgive me if this question comes across as ignorant. Did your parents find out, and how did they respond?
My mother passed 7-8 years ago now. My dad is alive. Basically, he found out when I did a program called The Pilgrimage, The Road to Rome, where we did the group of us followed a genuine Roman Catholic pilgrimage from the bottom of the Swiss Alps into the Vatican.
How incredible.
And that was bloody incredible. It was extraordinary. I think it got shown in Australia as well. And on the last day of this incredible walk, because I don't walk at all. Walking, really? Excuse me.
I love that. That's the most outrageous part of the whole...
I'm Stephen K.
I'm not here
walking
to walk.
and backpack. Oh, God.
Someone else is carrying this, right?
Yeah. And so on the last day of filming, they said, can you all wake up very early because we have a private half-hour audience with the Pope.
Wow.
And I was like, my initial reaction was absolutely no way. You know, I've got issues with the Catholic Church as an institution. You know, why would I want to be in the company of the head of this church, which in my view would rather I did not exist?
Yeah, who says I'm sinful just by being.
Just by being. So I was on the back foot. But then one of our group is a British TV presenter of the Islamic faith, a Marine, good friend of mine. She said, if anybody of any other faith invites me to their home, I would go. And that taught me a lesson. I thought, why am I? So I said, yes, I will go and meet the Pope.
Because he has invited you.
Because he's invited me. I'm not going to be a dick about it. But however, I want to ask questions, you know. And so, again, talking about representation, I thought if I go on this program and I'm seen sitting with the Pope as far as you are for me, and he's just praising me or blessing me and touching my forehead, and I say nothing, I would feel like a bit of a dick. So I just said to him, you know, I've got a couple of people in my life who were quite religious and they passed away. I want to know, as a gay man, will I ever see them again? I said to him right there. And I was ready for his answer. I was ready for him to say, oh, we're all God's or something to blow me off, right? Pardon the phrase.
He definitely didn't blow you off because he wants to go to heaven.
So he said, people put too much emphasis on the adjective gay rather than the noun man. This is not good. Those people who put too much emphasis on the adjective gay, those people do not have a human heart. We all have dignity. You do not lose your dignity. And I was just like blown away in that moment.
So I misunderstood. What was he saying?
He was saying that if you put too much emphasis on gay rather than the noun man, right, that's not good. We should be judging people by being a man.
So, I mean, does that not go against everything that the Catholic Church has always said, that homosexuality isn't natural? You cannot be two males or two females and get married. Does that not completely contradict?
It does, because he didn't explicitly say
you're going to hell.
Yeah, he didn't say you're going to hell, and he didn't explicitly say, oh, you're all welcome to heaven. It doesn't matter. He didn't say that. What he did was what I thought a very kind of general but a placating way of kind of saying, you know what, just because you're gay, I'm not going to be hounding you about that. Yeah. We should be thinking about mankind and what the evils that man do. What you've got, you're being gay, but you don't lose your dignity. I mean, that's what I took away from it, you know. And the weird thing about that hit me in the face, and I was nearly in tears. I mean, you know, I was just like, oh. And some of the others asked him questions about women's rights to their bodies in terms of abortion, etc. Yeah. And he sort of skirted around that. But when that program was aired, I was like, oh my goodness. He's going to get a lot of stick from this. I'm probably going to get a lot of stick from this. But when the program was aired, I even had the BBC call me up and go, we're just getting ready just in case anything blows off.
Yeah.
And nothing really blew off. And I thought, if I was maybe a high-profile white comedian or maybe someone like Stephen Fry or somebody, and the Pope said that to him, that would have been worldwide news.
Yeah.
Because that was quite deep.
It should have been like quite a big moment in time on TV.
Yeah. I mean, so my ego was no. So I was just
love me more.
Because I just thought, wow, this is, and I had so many people reach out to me when it came out, gays, straight, whatever, going, I'm really proud that you asked that question.
Yeah.
I'm really, you represented me, or someone who is gay and a Christian struggling with who they were. So things like that we don't even know that we're doing that has such an impact to other people is why I do this job.
Well, there was the moment where you did come out as gay in one of your stand-up routines.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that moment was pretty monumental in changing the way people viewed you. And actually, when we talk about having an impact, you don't realize the impact you have on people's lives. Talk us about the show, the decision to say, do you know what, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm going to publicly make a joke, declare it. What was that moment in time like?
It was a situation where I had just done a season in Australia. And I flew back to London and I was just, unpacking my case, being not very in the present. And the news was on in the background. And they talked about a body that was found in a place in southwest London called Clapham Common.
Yeah.
The person was killed in a homophobic attack. Oh, and I glanced up at the TV and they put a picture of the person and it was somebody that I knew. And I was incandescent with rage and anger that we live in London, this cosmopolitan city, yet there are people who will attack a complete stranger to the point of death because of their sexuality or what they perceive your sexuality to be. And I thought, it was that moment I thought, you know what, I can't sit back and say nothing. I've got to, lend a voice. Voices together in numbers. I can't just wait for Pride and go, wearing hot pants. I've got to do something. Yeah. And so I thought I'm going to write a show called All of Me, where I had to have someone direct the show because I found it difficult. Because the one line I said in the whole show, I didn't say anything else. All I said is I did the show up and talked about him. And then I said, oh, and by the way, I'm attracted to men. That's all I said. And you could hear audible gasps in the room. I even heard a woman's voice go, what a waste.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I took it as a big compliment, but I said there's plenty of Stevie to go around. So literally, again, maybe rather naively, people started saying, "Oh, Amos has come out in this show, one of the best shows he's ever written." And from that day forth is when I was described as black gay comedian. Wow. So it was kind of a double-edged sword in a weird way. We're talking quite a few years ago now, so I don't even know whether that held me back in my career. Because people don't know where to pigeonhole you.
But it also brings you into a whole new audience demographic as well. I mean, I think of someone like Ursula Carlson. Like, I went to her show last year and it was humongous. Like, we were at the the Triple C, which is like 5,000 people. Like, you couldn't even see her. She was a blip on the stage. And it was like such a momentous, but also like the whole audience, I would have said majority of people were a gay audience. They were all people who were there advocating within like the LGBT community. So I guess it also, in one instance, people who would never have been interested, would have been interested in your comedy if they thought you were straight, but then have some deep-seated homophobia in them are going to be turned off the comedy now.
Yes.
But you've opened yourself up to a whole authentic community who also are like, we appreciate the humor and we appreciate the subtleties of things that you're talking about as well.
I would agree with that, Laura, if I had done the show in the last sort of 5 years.
Right, you think it was predated
back then, it was a completely different time. I mean, I can't remember exactly when it was. It was probably like 15 years ago.
Yeah. But that is not long enough ago for someone to have been murdered.
It is not long ago. But the point is, when I did a show about it, there weren't many black comics on the circuit in the UK.
Yeah.
And there was a black comedy circuit, but there was no sort of crossover.
So did that, because I'm trying to put myself in your position in that moment, did you feel like that was putting a little bit of a bullseye on you in terms of, okay, I know there are people out there murdering people for being gay and black. I'm a public figure. A lot of people know me. They know where I am. They know where I'm performing. And now I've just laid claim to this, obviously because you are trying to change the conversation. But there must have been a level of you at that time that's like, holy shit, could I be in danger now?
Well, do you know what? My saving grace in many ways, respects, is the fact that social media wasn't a thing back then. Yeah. You know, definitely you'd been a target for abuse and online hate and whatever, because people think they have a piece of you, they can get to you. Even when I first came to Australia, I could count the gay comics, openly gay comics, on less than one hand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
fast forward 15 years, I mean, you mentioned Ursula Carson, Reese Nicholson, Hannah Gadsby. You know, 10 years ago, Hannah Gadsby's show would not have been a thing.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the hate would have been
been extraordinary. So that's what I mean about how times and attitude and language have changed. So the people that were the butt of the jokes are now having a voice. And that's what people tend to forget. Every single person on this planet has a story to tell. And it's how you tell that story.
I love how that's come full circle in terms of what you said at the very beginning, this idea that, you know, comedians who were punching down so significantly. And now it's like the playing field is more even because the people who are representing minority groups are able to have just as loud a voice. And that's probably the beauty of social media is people are able to find their communities.
Exactly. And also that you extend that to people like Sam Campbell, who's just doing blazing stuff around the world right now, and all the other kind of on the edge kind of comics who don't quite fit in and don't fit a mold, who have got an amazing voice, an amazing platform, because we're more receptive to that.
Totally.
As a public figure who, you know, is public on multiple different platforms, TV, stand-up, radio pod, writing, and somebody whose whole job is to walk the line and push the boundaries and to make people gasp. What is your thought on cancel culture? And like someone making a mistake, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing?
I think cancel culture is dangerous. I think there are certain people who claim to have been cancelled, who are clearly not cancelled.
Totally.
You know, there's another double-edged sword there where, you know, you've still got a massive platform. You've still got $23 million off Netflix. You're not cancelled, but it's now a thing to say. Also, people jump on a bandwagon. That's a thing. If you weren't there, you didn't see it, and you didn't get the context, you've got no voice. You know, don't add your voice to a story that you know nothing about. It's easy to do that.
Yeah.
What we should be doing is educating each other. People make mistakes. People do make mistakes. I'm not saying that people should be given a free pass to say and do whatever they want. We live in a society where there is something called freedom of speech, right? But if we have to uphold the values of freedom of speech, we also have to uphold the values of freedom of expression, whereby we can react how we see fit, depending on what it is you say, yeah? But to cancel someone immediately without having a due process, I think is ridiculous. If it's a comic you're talking about, you cancel that person by not buying a ticket to their show.
Yeah.
What you don't do is you just go, oh, I heard through so-and-so and so-and-so that he might have said that, and it's all muddied the waters. It's not even factual anymore.
And also in terms of comedy, I think and we've touched on it as well, but like jokes out of context. And you can't take a joke out of context. You have to look at a joke as a bigger picture or look at the political statement that it's making as well, rather than just it being like a written down line.
Yeah.
Because things, when they are typed up, sound very different and hit very different to things that are spoken.
Yes. I think, and also we live in, I don't want to sound like an old man, but we live in a society where, you know, everything is quite immediate.
Yeah.
You know, social media, immediate. That's one thing I learned from the jungle. I've now decided to put my phone down one day a week for 24 hours.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care what's going on in the world.
Is that why you haven't written back to me the last 2 days?
You know, just one day, and I think we could all do with that, just to kind of take stock of it and just be present in the world, you know, because nothing is that important.
Well, before we started this, we were talking about, I asked you what was like your biggest surprise from the jungle, and you said something really beautiful about it was discovering more about yourself. Can you give us a bit more on that, and like what was the thing that you took away from it? Not just the phone, but about your own like sense of self.
Well, my sense of self, I've always been very self-conscious about my body and my image. For example, my skinny legs. I've never ever had shorts on display anywhere. And I think I told some of the guys in the jungle, day one, you're never going to see anything below my knees.
Stephen, when he says that, he had literally his entire life never gone outside in public, not once, in shorts. And the jungle was the first time in his life.
Because you were embarrassed, or because you, like, what was the reason?
Because as a kid, I was made fun of by my skinny legs. And as an adult, I didn't feel comfortable about my skinny legs. I didn't think my torso matched my legs. You know, all the ways that you see yourself, that you don't recognize how other people see. And my arms, you know, thank goodness for these guys, you know, my campmates, because they were the ones going, oh my God, you've got really strong arms. Because, you know, you don't see the back of your arms. You've got, I think Callum was the one who told me what this muscle here is called.
Because you took your shirt off one day to get, whatever it was, swimming or getting changed. And everyone was like, dang, because he always covered up. Everyone's like, damn, Stephen, like,
Get your arms out.
You're jacked. And he was like, oh my God, don't look at me. We're like, what? We're like, but your arms are amazing. But I don't think anyone had maybe ever said that to you before. So you just had this preconceived idea that was ingrained in you from a child, from somebody being mean to you as a kid.
Yeah. And I think all those things that form us in our formative years stay with us. Mm-hmm. And unless you have a situation where there are people who can validate you and encourage you and support you. And that's one thing I found, again, with the jungle. I allowed myself to be vulnerable with 11 strangers. And if you ask any of my friends, that's not me at all. I would not relinquish power in that way to give you, like, that's why I was annoyed when I started to be described as gay, black gay or whatever, because you're giving people ammunition to do things to you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's like you're giving the power back. Yeah, to describe you in a way. Absolutely. And I think also, like, a lot of people, and not just comedians, we all do this. Often we will say a joke and be self-deprecating, and it's not actually because we want to make the joke about ourselves, but it's like, well, if I make the joke, you can't make it because I've already done it.
I'll give it a really silly example. I was with friends of mine as soon as I left the jungle, I went to Brisbane to do some shows, and some friends of mine were there with two of their friends, one of whom I'd met before on one occasion. And he was quite merry, quite drunk, bought me a drink, and I accepted. Bad mistake. Someone's drunk, offers you a drink, in your company, you're now accepting him into your fold. The next thing he said to me, I'm not even joking, he said, oh, let's do that nigger thing. And brought his fist towards me.
Like a fist pump.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'm like, whoa, where
you don't get to call me these things.
We're
not that.
When did this happen? When did we become, there's certain friends of mine, as we all know, that you say things to each other you wouldn't say openly. But no. Because you bought me a drink and you're in my company, does that give you license to say what you want?
Here's my question, though, in that. To you, when something is offensive, how important is intention? Because he would say, I didn't intend to offend you, but that doesn't matter. You're offended. So where does that line sit between intention versus offense?
It's a very fine line. I'll give you that. But as I said before, I think you can always tell if someone is being genuine in their curiosity, in their question, if someone's being provocative. And the reason why I know for him is because a friend of mine had already told me that she had challenged him about using the N-word before.
Right. And he was like, I'm going to do it. He felt like he had liberty too.
And I think because of the drink, and because he'd seen me on stage, whatever, I used the N-word on stage in context as a joke. So he must have thought, he's okay with that.
Totally.
But no.
Yeah. Let's take a pivot because I could talk about you. I could talk to you for so long, but I know we have a time frame. Let's pivot to the royal family. I mean, your hint on I'm a Celebrity was loved by the royal family, but that's because you have been invited to perform for them before. You do have a bit of a connection to them. Talk to us about the time that you actually got to meet them and perform for them.
Oh, I done Prince Charles. Well, the former Prince Charles' birthday. I was on with.
You forgot their name?
Yeah, two legends.
One of the other royals.
Joan Rivers, who's left us, and Robin Williams was also on the bill, who's left us.
He's my favourite person.
And again, the members of the royal family that I've met are quite funny people. Yeah?
Are they?
But yeah, they've got a sense of humour.
Yeah.
But we only see one side of them, which is them opening something, them smiling at something, them waving at something.
Cutting a ribbon.
Them delivering a speech in a very sort of stilted, very professional way. But like all of us, we've got different facets to our personalities. They're very funny people. I remember doing a joke when I met the late Prince Philip, and I did the joke about, I really want to get another BBC series. But as we know, the BBC has a diversity policy, and apparently I've got to wait for Lenny Henry to die. One in, one out, let's not rock the boat. Joke. And in the lineup, Prince Philip comes to me and he goes, you're the comedian who wants Lenny Henry to die. We can arrange that. I mean, wow. I mean, my whole thing is, if you don't know people, we can't judge them. Like all the flack that Prince Harry and Meghan are getting, which I mean, man, I defy anybody to be, 9 years old and go through the death of your mother in the public glare. And to top that all, have to walk behind her coffin.
Yeah. With no emotion.
And show no emotion. As a child.
Yeah.
Wow. When I lost my mum, I was in my late 40s. And I cried like a baby.
You spoke about it on I'm a Celebrity. You spoke about palliative care. That was the charity that you represented.
Yes. Thanks. Yeah.
And I I mean, unless you're somebody who has gone through it, I don't think it's an experience that anyone could really understand. Was it your mum that you were with alongside? Was that who you were representing in the jungle?
Well, I was representing my twin sister,
Yes.
essentially. And that's when I first saw firsthand work that palliative care charities and organizations do. And the thing I took away from that is that none of us use those services until we need them.
Yeah.
And
so you don't think about them.
You don't think about them. And a lot of the people who end up working for these charities, organizations, are actually volunteers who have been through it and are so grateful for what they've done that they give something back.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful. And that's why I started a thing in the UK collecting money, doing charity nights for 2 palliative care charities in the UK that are close to me. And when I came to Australia, I thought I'd continue the same thing, but find a palliative care charity in the area that I was in.
Yeah.
Hence coming across Banksia, because their whole ethos, as with most of these, is the quality of life. They don't think about the end of life, but the quality of life.
And maintaining that.
Yeah.
And it could be from anything from the person who's going through it to their family, taking them out for a day out or going to the movies or something, just to add to the knowledge that, yes, the life is limited, but we don't have to be all sad and gloomy till the end. We can still embrace the time we have left.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's incredible, isn't it? Also, just that you're not alone doing it. That I think there's so many. We're going through it with my mum and my stepdad at the moment. My stepdad, he's entering palliative care, and we have someone who's like going through that transition with my mum. And she was so alone, and she was so like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
There's no one here to help. And it's been revolutionary for her. It really has helped her so much. So yeah, I think unless you've seen it firsthand, like, you really don't realize how important it is.
Oh, Laura, darling, I feel you. I feel you, because honestly, that's why I really want to highlight, I don't want to say the industry, but this whole area, because it's so important.
Yeah.
I can see the emotions coming out of you already, because I went through the same thing. And I'm really good friends now with some of the people who work in these palliative care charities, because I'm in awe of them.
Yeah.
I'm in awe because, like I said earlier, I couldn't do that job. Because you
take it all home. Yeah.
I will take it all home. And you see people who are so selfless, and the little things matter when you think you're alone, and you can pick up a phone or you can a referral to this or that, and they are there for you 24/7.
It takes a very special person.
Yeah.
Stephen, I said it before, we could have talked to you forever, but unfortunately we do have a time frame. But I can't thank you enough for coming on, and I'm so glad we got to do it while you were here in person before you chuffed back off to the UK. One thing I will say that I almost forgot about, but talking about crazy experiences coming full circle, when I got out of the jungle, I FaceTimed Ben, like my boyfriend Ben, straight away. Hadn't spoken to him in a month, and Stephen was there at the hotel we're at, and Ben goes to me, Stephen taught me English. And I was like, what? Stephen?
You were like doing this on the side?
Was Stephen a low-key English teacher? And he's like, no. When Ben moved from Switzerland to the UK at 15, his English was not great, right? Like enough to get by. But the way that they would learn English is to watch something that you love in English. So he used to just watch the comedy shows on the Apollo online, and he just watched Stephen over and over and over again. And he's like, I literally learned English from Stephen. And I was like, how amazing is that? Like 17 years later, I'm locked in the jungle with this guy that taught my partner English. I think that is such a crazy...
And how fortuitous that I was there in that moment, and then you put the FaceTime phone into me, and I had goosebumps.
It's amazing.
And that, I think you're absolutely right. When it goes full circle, you have no idea what you do, how that affects somebody else. If it wasn't for me, Ben would not speak English.
And I wouldn't be with him.
So I think you owe me.
I owe you my relationship.
But it's amazing how you touch people's lives in some sort of way.
Without knowing.
And that's why I said to Britt, when my partner was in the jungle and I introduced him to Britt, the first thing he said was his sister, who lives in rural England, listens to this podcast.
Can you believe that?
So amazing, isn't it? What's her name?
Her name is Rosie Sington.
Hi, Rosie.
But how crazy. Like, it's so cool to have someone that lives in, like, rural England.
Yeah.
Also, I just felt a bit of flex in that moment because I was like, oh, cool, I got some credibility. Like, Stephen knows I'm someone in here.
You're like, see, people actually listen to the podcast.
And not even that. It's the fact that I had a connection with you with Ben, and then I had a connection back at you with my partner, which I didn't know. It was just like because you don't know how things are connected.
Totally.
You know? Like I didn't know about your story, and all I can do is send all best wishes wishes to your mum and the chap, because it is a difficult time, but with a palliative care team behind you, it can be better and slightly easier, and that's all you need.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming and being a part of the podcast. Like I said, I feel like I already had seen such a version of you. Meeting you in the flesh.
He's better in real life, right?
Yeah. I mean, everything's better in real life, right? But
I know,
it's
right?
so nice. It's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing everything so openly. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
If you guys ever get a chance to go and see Stephen in Australia or in the UK, anywhere in the world that he is, you are constantly coming back to Australia. Like you have a big family here and you're always performing back at home as well. Please go and see him. What's your website?
Oh, StephenKAmos.com.
We'll link it.
Is that it? Yeah.
I love the confidence.
Yeah,
we'll put it in
the
show notes. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.